What's up, everybody? This is Wired from Junk Robot, and today I'm bringing you the Rogue Specializations Guide. This basically includes all the tips, tricks, and all the stats for the Rogue Specializations, including all 3 that were not found in the demo. So please use it and enjoy it so you can get a nice head start on your Rogue before Dragon Age 2 releases. The first specialization we'll be taking a look at for the Rogue class is called the Shadow. The Shadow excels in not only stealth but also battlefield tactics. This is the perfect class if you like dealing a lot of damage without even being noticed. So now let's take a look at the stats, skills, and present talents in the Shadow tree and give you a better idea of what I'm talking about when I say tricks of the trade and stealth. The first talent in the Shadow tree is called Inconspicuous. It requires you be level 8 and it also requires that you are a Shadow. For a short time, the Shadow assumes a misleading stance that attracts little attention. Upon activating this talent, the Shadow also sheds the threat accumulated from previous strikes. This ability actually reduces your threat by 100% and reduces the generation of your threat by 50%. It lasts 10 seconds, costs 30 stamina, and has a decent amount of cooldown. Next up in the Inconspicuous tree is called Indiscernible. Requires level 12 and also requires that you of course have taken Inconspicuous. It also has a secondary requirement of 2 points in the Shadow tree. The Shadow can maintain the rules of Inconspicuous for longer. Basically, it buffs your Inconspicuous ability by granting 10 more seconds of the ability. It is obviously an upgrade power, so it automatically applies itself once it has been taken. The final talent in the Inconspicuous branch is called Imperceptible. Requires you be level 14 and of course have the Inconspicuous talent. It also requires a base of 4 Shadow points in the specialization. The Inconspicuous Shadow can now avert all hostile attention for a short time, which means it reduces threat generation by an extra 50% whenever you use Inconspicuous, meaning now it has 100% threat generation reduction, meaning any attacks you do, the enemies won't even notice them. Next up in the Shadow specialization tree is Pinpoint Precision. It requires you be level 7 and also requires that you're a Shadow. The Shadow is adept at finding the enemy's weak spots, consequently critical hits inflict more damage. It is just a basic critical damage plus 25% passive ability. This is always active, so as soon as you choose this, all your criticals will be doing 25% more damage. The next tree in the Shadow specialization is called Decoy. Requires you be level 10 and also have taken Pinpoint Precision. Also requires you have taken Inconspicuous. The Shadow is a master of misdirection, creating a personal decoy that keeps enemies occupied for a short time, while the rogue escapes in stealth. The decoy health is 50% of the rogue's maximum health, and it gives you a 100% stealth chance that lasts for 10 seconds. It also costs 40 stamina and has a cooldown of 30 seconds. The next talent in the decoy tree is called Sturdy Decoy. It requires you be level 14 and also requires that you have taken the prerequisite decoy. The decoy can take more damage before enemies can destroy it. Decoy health is increased by another 50% of the rogue's maximum health, and the duration is increased by plus 5 seconds. The final talent in the decoy tree is called Rig Decoy. Requires you to be level 16, also requires that you have decoy, and have at least invested 4 points in the Shadow specialization. The decoy becomes a vicious trap that explodes when enemies destroy it. It does fire damage upon death proportional to the decoy's health. The next talent in the Shadow tree is called the Disorienting Criticals. Requires level 9, requires you take Pinpoint Precision, and also requires that you have 4 points in the Shadow specialization. While obscured, the Shadow has a considerable bonus to critical damage. In addition, any critical hits the Shadow lands while obscured automatically disorient enemies, leaving them vulnerable to further harm from a warrior or mage. Critical damage is plus 25% when you are obscured. Disorient chance is 100% for critical hits when obscured. This is obviously a passive ability and is always effective. Next up in the Shadow tree is called Predator. Requires you to be level 13, also requires you have disorienting criticals and at least 5 points in the Shadow specialization. Shadows are particularly deadly when they manage to flank their opponents. Whenever the Shadow strikes an enemy from behind, whether it be a basic attack or using a talent, the attack will always result in a critical hit. This is a passive ability, so it's always active, meaning whenever you're behind or to the side of an opponent, you will automatically critical. The top tier talent of the Shadow tree is called Shadow Veil. Requires level 11 and also requires that you have taken at least decoy and disorienting criticals. The Shadow becomes obscured when entering stealth. This effect persists for a short time after dropping out of stealth. It gives you a 100% chance to go obscure when you use stealth and is a passive ability, so it is always active. is a good ability to use to synergize with the other skills in the Shadow Tree that give you bonuses when you do obscure. Up next is the Duelist. If you like getting down and dirty in one-on-one confrontation, that might be the specialization for you. If sneaky people are shadows, then gentlemen are duelists, because the duelist prefers one-on-one combat on uneven terms. If you prefer to get down and dirty one-on-one and really get in the muck, then the duelist is definitely the specialization you're going to want to focus on. The duelist offers a completely different playstyle than you would expect from a rogue, and can really be a breath of fresh air for someone who wants to try something new and actually have a nice little twist to it. So get ready to pull off your fisticuffs and throw down the gauntlet as you take on the Duelist Specialization. First up and most iconic in the Duelist tree is called Throw the Gauntlet. Requires you to be level 8 and also requires that you have, of course, chosen the Duelist Specialization. The Duelist issues an irresistible challenge to a single foe. The enemy immediately abandons its other opponents to engage the rogue. It lasts 20 seconds and costs 25 stamina, with a cooldown of 25 seconds. Basically, this is a rogue taunt that causes the enemy to come at you with all he's got. The next ability in the Throw the Gauntlet tree is called To the Death. It requires you to be level 12 and also have, of course, Throw the Gauntlet. But it also has a secondary requirement of at least 2 points in the Duelist Specialization. The rogue's opponent is completely absorbed in this duel. For a short time, the enemy will not seek a new target unless either combatant falls. The ranged foe also attacks carelessly, inflicting less damage against the rogue. Basically, this makes your taunt a guarantee. The enemy will never leave from you unless either one of you die. Not only that, he'll be dealing even less damage. This is an upgrade to your Throw the Gauntlet ability, and is effective every time you use it. The last ability in the Gauntlet tree is called Cutting Barbs. Requires you to be level 14 and also, of course, have the prerequisite Throw the Gauntlet. It also has a secondary requirement of at least 4 points in the Duelist Specialization. The Duelist taunts the enemy into lowering its guard. Basically, you use this and it upgrades your gauntlet once again. Enemy defense goes down by a whole 50% and it lasts a whole 20 seconds. This is actually used every time that you use Throw the Gauntlet. The next ability in the Duelist Specialization is called Sure Strikes. Requires you to be level 10 and also requires that you have the prerequisite Throw the Gauntlet. Also has a secondary requirement of having at least 2 points in the Duelist Specialization. The experienced duelist has survived many a combat and is more likely to hit foes. It basically gives you a bonus of plus 20% passively to your attack. Now, attack does not affect damage, it does affect chance to hit. So this will not boost your damage, but will make you more accurate. The next ability in the Duelist Specialization is called Parry. Requires you to be level 7 and also requires that you have at least picked Duelist. While in this mode, the Duelist defenses are strengthened. Against an opponent that has picked up the Gauntlet, the Duelist defenses are nigh impenetrable. Basically, it gives you a bonus of plus 20% defense, and if you have used Throw the Gauntlet on a target, it gives you an additional plus 20% defense. However, it requires 20% of your stamina constantly just to be maintained. It has a cooldown of 5 seconds. Moving on in the parry tree, we come to Riposte. It requires level 11 and also requires that you have taken parry. The Duelist counterattacks are more lethal. It gives you a bonus of plus 20% attack whenever you're sustaining parry. Additional 20% versus enemies affected by your Throw the Gauntlet, giving you a 40% boost if you've actually taunted someone with Throw the Gauntlet. The final ability in the parry tree is called On Guard. It requires level 13 and of course requires parry. The Duelist attacks with increased fury. Increases your critical chance by plus 10% whenever you're using parry, but it also gives you another bonus of plus 10% whenever you have taunted an enemy with Throw the Gauntlet. It obviously upgrades your parry. The next ability in the Duelist tree is called Evasive Maneuvers. It requires to be level 10 and also requires that you've at least picked up parry. After years of extensive training, the Duelist has become keenly aware of incoming attacks. It grants you another bonus of defense by plus 20% and isn't affected by any sustained abilities or taunts. The top tier talent in the Duelist Specialization is called Vendetta. Requires you to be level 11 and also requires that not only do you have Throw the Gauntlet, but you also have parry. It also requires a bonus of at least 2 points in Duelist. Every duelist, even an archer, knows that the most memorable fight happens at close quarters, and that the first strike is the most crucial. To gain that advantage, the rogue vanishes behind a cloud of smoke, then strikes the enemy viciously from behind. This ability can be used from across the battlefield. For few rogues are as capable of moving in stealth as a duelist. It deals physical damage of 99, hits with physical force 2 times, and costs 40 stamina. Also has a nice cooldown effect of 40 seconds, and is obviously an activated ability, basically making this a teleporting backstab at long range. The final ability in the Duelist tree isn't an ability at all. It's in fact an upgrade. It's called Blood Feud and requires that you're at least level 16 and have taken Vendetta. Even foes toughened by years of experience now suffer serious harm from Vendetta, and those that a warrior has left staggered fare even worse. Physical damage 300% versus staggered targets. It lowers the enemy armor to 0% momentarily and also lowers their damage resistance to 0% temporarily. It also reduces the Vendetta cooldown by 10 seconds. So that concludes the Duelist specialization. Hope you guys enjoyed it. It's actually pretty interesting and a nice different playstyle that might bring a breath of fresh air to players who want something different from their rogue. Next up is the obvious, the Assassin. Probably the most looked at and most wanted of all the specializations for this class. So please stick around with me and enjoy, because I will be bringing you all the full stats and everything else for the Assassin class. Yes, everybody, it is time to take a look at the Assassin. Just for picking the Assassin, you get a nice 10% damage bonus to your critical damage, and you also get a cool little symbol with 3 little kunai on it. Now, we're not going to be able to talk a lot about the skills in this one because we're strapped for time, so let's get right into it. First up in the Assassin's arsenal is called Mark of Death. Requires level 7 and also that you're an Assassin. The Assassin marks a target, revealing weaknesses that allies can exploit. Attacks from any ally now cause the marked target to take more damage. Enemy damage resistance is reduced by 25%, lasts 10 seconds, costs 25 stamina, and has a 40-second cooldown. It is also an activated ability, so you're going to have to put this one on your bar to use it. Next up in the Mark tree is called Enduring Mark. Requires that you be level 11 and also requires that you've taken at least Mark of Death. The Mark of Death lasts longer now on the Assassin's target. Duration plus 10 seconds to Mark of Death, and it's obviously an upgrade. It only upgrades Mark of Death. The final ability in the Mark tree is called Mark of Doom. Requires you be level 13 and also requires you, of course, have Mark of Death. The Mark of Death further increases damage from incoming attacks. It lowers enemy resistance by another 25%. It upgrades your Mark of Death, so this happens every time you use it. Next up in the Assassin specialization is called Bloodlust. Requires level 8 and also requires that you've been an Assassin. The draining energy from the kill, the Assassin regains stamina upon killing an enemy. The stamina regeneration is a minimum of 5% upon enemy death. The actual regeneration rate is based on the enemy's rank, meaning you will get more stamina from bosses, lieutenants, or captains than you would from a normal grunt. Moving on, the next ability in the Assassination specialization is Pinpoint Strikes. Requires level 9, requires Mark of Death, and Bloodlust. For a short time, the Assassin exploits enemy weaknesses with deadly accuracy, scoring a critical hit with every blow. Increases your critical chance to 100% and lasts 10 seconds. Costs 30 stamina and has a 40-second cooldown. Next up in the Strikes tree is Relentless Strikes. Requires level 13 and also requires that you've taken Pinpoint Strikes. The Assassin's Pinpoint Strikes become an unrelenting assault. It doubles the duration of Pinpoint Strikes and is obviously an upgrade ability. The last standalone ability in the Assassin specialization is called Devious Harm. Requires level 12 and it also requires that you have at least taken Pinpoint Strikes. The more cunning the Assassin, the more damage critical hits inflict. It basically doubles the bonus of cunning, which means if you put 1 point into cunning, instead of getting 1% critical increase in damage, you get 2%. It's a passive ability and is always active. Next up in the Assassin specialization is obviously the top tier talent, Assassinate. Requires level 10 and also requires you've at least taken Pinpoint Strikes. Assassinate kills weak enemies outright, while survivors suffer a massive critical hit. It deals physical damage of 192, has a 100% crit chance, also costs 40 stamina, has a cooldown of 40 seconds. It's an activated ability, so you will be putting this on your action bar. The next ability in the Assassinate tree is called Annihilate. Requires level 10 and also requires that you've at least taken Assassinate. Assassinate now inflicts a critical hit against enemies who would otherwise be immune. It is even more devastating against a brittled target. Physical damage is plus 400% versus brittle targets. It reduces the cooldown of Assassinate by 10 seconds and is obviously an upgrade. The last ability in the Assassin specialization and the Assassinate tree is called Overkill. Requires level 16 and also requires Assassinate. Assassinate becomes tremendously powerful, instantly fatal to all but the toughest enemies. Physical damage is increased by 66 and it obviously upgrades the base Assassinate. I want to thank everyone for watching my video, and also I hope you guys enjoyed this little in-depth look for the rogue specializations. Please rate, comment, or subscribe if you do like this video.